All right, thank you all for coming today. My name is Larry Kessler with the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research, and I'm pleased to release our annual economic report to the governor for 2023. So this report provides both a short-term 10 quarters ahead state forecast for the Tennessee economy, as well as a more long-term forecast looking 10 years out. Today, I'll make some brief remarks hitting some of the highlights of the report, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. So both Tennessee and the U.S. saw extremely strong growth in 2021 as the economy reopened. The real estate market showed incredible strength, and consumers spent heavily to satisfy pent-up demand. In Tennessee, strong economic growth, it continued into the first quarter of 2022, but then slowed dramatically in the second quarter. So real GDP growth, which measures the value of all goods and services produced in the economy, and it's really our best measure of overall economic growth in the state, it largely slowed because of extremely high inflation. So in nominal terms or current dollars, Tennessee GDP rose by 8% or more in each of the first two quarters of 2022. However, this occurred because people were spending more money to purchase goods and services and not because they were actually purchasing more goods and services. So once adjusted for inflation, Tennessee real GDP, it grew by less than 1% in the second quarter. So then in response to elevated inflation, the Federal Reserve has aggressively increased interest rates, including hiking by 0.5 percentage points yesterday, with the hopes of reducing demand and easing price pressures. And in doing so, higher interest rates, they've increased the cost of borrowing, which has put downward pressure on investment spending, including in the real estate market, and could trigger an economic recession. So as a result, the national forecast is calling for a mild economic recession, with U.S. GDP falling through the first half of 2023 and falling by 2.2% for the 2023 year as a whole. By comparison, Tennessee's economic outlook is more promising. So in Tennessee, real GDP growth is still expected to slow significantly, but importantly, we're projecting that economic growth will remain positive. So the state outlook calls for Tennessee real GDP growth of 2.4% this year, and then a slowdown to 0.7% in 2023. And compared to the nation, Tennessee's outlook is more favorable due to a strong rate of in-migration into Tennessee as more people have moved to the state in recent years, which has led to an uptick in economic activity, as well as a really healthy state budget due to strong tax revenue collections coupled with direct state aid from the federal government through the 2021 American Rescue Plan, which has put the state economy on pretty strong footing. The state's labor market also continues to show strength. In Tennessee, there are now more than 100,000 workers on payrolls than there were prior to the pandemic. And Tennessee employment is projected to grow by a very strong 3.9% this year, but job growth will then slow, or projecting will then slow to 1% next year, as some businesses that rapidly expanded over the last few years will slow or even reverse their rate of hiring, and higher interest rates increase the cost of borrowing and making it more difficult for existing firms to expand and new firms to raise capital. So we view that sectors that are more sensitive to higher interest rates, such as will likely face the greatest challenges. So for example, employment in financial services will likely fall as a slowdown in the real estate market leads to a projected reduction in real estate and mortgage related jobs. So then as job growth slows, Tennessee's unemployment rate, which currently sits at a nearly all-time low of 3.5%, is projected to slowly trend upwards to 3.8% next year and then 4% in 2024. But it'll remain below the national unemployment rate, which is projected to increase to 5.3% by 2024. So the report also examines recent population trends in Tennessee, including a look at population characteristics related to workforce quality, such as education and health. So unfortunately, on the health front, Tennessee consistently trails the nation on a variety of health indicators due to a high number of unhealthy behaviors and high number of serious health ailments. However, on the education front, things are much more promising. So as of 2021, Tennessee now has a higher percentage of its adult population with a high school diploma or higher than the U.S. as a whole. So the state's high school attainment rate sits at 89.7% versus now 89.4% for the nation. And this is the first time that Tennessee's high school attainment rate among those aged 25 or older exceeds the national average. Finally, in addition to the economic update, the report also provides an analysis of advanced manufacturing, which can be found in Chapter 3. So in this chapter, we develop a number of indexes to rank manufacturing industries based on their level of advancedness. and then rank all US states based on their composition of these advanced manufacturing industries. So we create state rankings a few different ways, and in all cases, Tennessee ranks among the top 10 of all states, due largely to the strong presence of motor vehicle manufacturing and motor vehicle parts manufacturing in the state. We also use county level data to measure the readiness of each Tennessee county to support advanced manufacturing industries, as well as the progress that each county has made over the last 10 years. So there's a lot of really interesting information in that chapter, and I'd encourage everyone to check it out. That's chapter 3. With that, I'll stop and I'll open the floor to any questions.
First question, I know it's a lot of information that is in the report. What would you say for the average person listening who may not understand all of these terms, what is kind of the biggest takeaway of this year's economic report for the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, I think the most important point is that while all these kind of forecasters throughout the nation are predicting that there's going to be a recession in the US, we have a more optimistic outlook for Tennessee. Economic activity will likely slow, but it's going to stay positive. And again, that's really because we've seen so many more people move into the state in the last couple of years, and that's led to increased economic activity.
So when you say mild recession, meaning we are going to kind of reverse a little bit, but just not as bad as the national average?
No, so no recession in Tennessee is in our projections. So meaning that we're going to still see positive growth, whereas the mild recession, that's the US projections, and it's like really mild. So far in the projections so far, like I think it was just 0.2% reduction in economic activity. But for Tennessee, to reiterate, no recession is on the outlook in our projections. It's just kind of a slowdown in positive growth.
You kind of touched on a lot. I don't know if I have too many follow-up questions, to be honest. You kind of laid it all out for us.
That was the plan.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Hey.
I was wondering to talk a bit about immigration a little bit, and specifically young adults. Is there a specific area that those young adults are moving to? Because I know that in Knox County, we're not seeing a lot of young adults move to the area.
So we have, first at the state level, we look at kind of population change by age bracket. And what's interesting is, so it's generally been over the last decade, the most people who have, the population growth has been largest in the older age bracket, so 55 and up. But that's been kind of consistent throughout the last decade, staying at, I don't remember, I think it was maybe 30,000 people a year or something. Whereas the younger kind of working age population, 20 to 44, we've actually seen a major acceleration in the number of people in that age group in Tennessee, which is pretty encouraging. So those are the people that are going to remain in the labor force, hopefully, or at least in the near term or medium term. But in terms of actual population changes, most of it's been in the Middle Tennessee area, and then sporadically in kind of the larger metropolitan areas like Knoxville and Chattanooga. But a lot of the growth has been in Middle Tennessee. Yep.
I do have one more question. Sure. So I know population-wise, Tennessee, I mean, has kind of grown significantly the last few years, right? I mean, are there drawbacks to the population growing so quickly? Is there such a thing as too much growth too quickly? Yeah,
I mean, there's always trade-offs, right? So we're seeing with all of this growth, we're seeing economic growth and potentially avoiding an economic recession. But at the same time, there's now, if we look at the real estate market, there's all this competition for housing. And so housing prices have gone up and it's become unaffordable for some families and some young adults. So that's probably the biggest trade-off so far. And with anything, there's always going to be growing pains though.
And forgive me if it sounds like a similar question or you already answered this. So kind of piggybacking off of that, with all the development in the states, specifically in Nashville, and then because I think that's probably the biggest development to come, and then just in Knoxville and other parts of the state, how does that affect the economic?
So I think, so we have, in terms of making our projections, we try to incorporate kind of expected or planned growth going forward. I think the best example is the electric vehicle manufacturing plant that's going to be opening up in West Tennessee. So that's projected to open up in 2025 with construction happening in 2024. So we're projecting a pretty strong boost in construction payrolls just for the building of that plant, and then another boost in kind of manufacturing employment once the factory's online and we see an influx of like motor vehicle manufacturing jobs. So that's just an example, but we try to incorporate kind of the expected growth and the growth we've seen kind of historically into our projections and into this report.
Can you talk a bit about the college attainment rate and why it's so critical to the economy?
Yeah, so education attainment in general, it's really important because just on average, we usually see that with higher education, you can usually find higher paying jobs, and then those people can spend more money in the economy, and that kind of leads to a multiplier effect where the economy continues to grow. And we've seen, like I mentioned in the press conference or in my remarks, we've seen that high school attainment has grown really rapidly over the last 10 or 15 years in the state. And we're now for the first time exceeding the national average with high school diplomas or higher. With college attainment, that is not happening. We are seeing some kind of a slight advancement in the number of adults or the percentage of adults with a bachelor's degree or higher, but we still trail the nation significantly. And those are the data that are most readily available in the census. But I think if you were to try to look at other data that looked at kind of the percentage of adults with certificates or other types of college credentials, you'd probably see that Tennessee is catching up a lot more quickly. But those data aren't as quickly available and readily available. So we didn't include those in the report this year.